It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to this interview series of Mentor My Board, that is Boardroom Talks. Boardroom is a place where fortunes of the great companies are written, and hence, in the pursuit of bringing the best practices, followed by boardrooms, directors, eminent directors, independent directors, CEOs, corporate professionals, we have come out with this interview series. And let me introduce first Mentor My Board to you. Mentor My Board is a platform which is fully functional now, where corporate directors come together to learn, to network, to sharpen their skills, and get opportunity of serving on the companies to act as directors, women directors, independent directors, and get mentored by the expert mentors on the areas of business, governance, finance, marketing, strategy, and so on. We are on a mission to transform Indian corporate directors and boardrooms and create a community of 1 lakh directors by 2027. So we have been getting valuable response from you as the viewers, and thank you for liking our series, and surely we will bring eminent directors before you with their immense expertise and sharings and knowledge sharings. Kindly do share, like, subscribe our Facebook page, LinkedIn page, Mentor My Board, and our YouTube channel. So today I see as Divya Momaya, founder of Mentor My Board, invite our esteemed moderator, CS Bharti Iyer, who has rich 30 years of insurance industry experience, and she's an eminent advisor to Mentor My Board. And it gives me really immense pleasure to have Mr. R Gopalkrishnan with us for this Boardroom Talk series.
Welcome, sir.
He's been author, corporate advisor with more than 5 decades of vast experience. So I request Bharti to introduce Mr. Gopal to us all. And over to you, Bharti. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's indeed my very proud privilege and pleasure to welcome Mr. R Gopalakrishnan, Ramabhadran Gopalakrishnan. Is that right, sir?
Right.
He is having so many accolades. I mean, he has had so many achievements to his credit. First of all, I'll just introduce very shortly, author and corporate advisor. He's been a professional manager since 1967, ex-chairman of Unilever Arabia, ex-managing director of Brook Bond Lipton, ex-vice chairman of Hindustan Lever, and has also held a position as director at Tata Sons, and currently is an independent director on the board of Tata Sons. He's also on Castrol India and also of Lemas, I think, that company in Sri Lanka. Besides that, he's been author of so many books. I think you can see the view of the books in the background. And most of those books are very well written, management books, corporate management, corporate governance books, which we will be shortly introducing in our next episode, where we will be focusing on Mr. Gopalakrishnan's expertise as a corporate governance director and advisory position. So, while we want to actually have you, talk about your various principles which you were expounding, sir, we just want you to give us a short background of how you, moved from an employee position onto the board. What are the special skill sets? What you feel is required of aspiring directors who are listening to you now, and various things of that sort, and then go on to the various principles which you were talking so interestingly about.
Thank you, Bharti, and thank you, Divya, for having me on this program. I'm delighted Mentor My Board is trying to do what you said you're doing, because we seem to be running companies on the basis that you just become a director. You keep progressing from one level to another. And while it is true that anybody who's grown up an adult can become a father or a mother,
Yes.
that doesn't mean that they are competent fathers or competent mothers. You have to do something to become competent at being father or mother. And we all know this from our own experiences. In the same way, just because you founded a company, it doesn't mean you're a director of the company. You're entitled to be. But then you have to do something to learn how to be a director of a company. And that requires some degree of hand-holding. I say some degree because it cannot be taught like in a classroom. But some parts of it can be taught. So, compliments to Mentor My Board, and very important activity.
Thank you.
India, most of our companies are family managed businesses. I think 70-75% is the last I heard. We are very much dependent as an economy on SMEs, MSMEs, startups, and I am not talking to people who are working as directors of Hindustan Lever or ICICI Bank or Tata Steel. I am talking to people who have become director in a sense because they are associated or started or founded an MSME. And the concept of what is governance has to be very clear in their mind. And I would like to respond to your question about my own journey by very briefly telling you that when I started my career, which is, as you said, Divya, a long time ago, 53 years ago, I was like anybody else, 26, 21 years old. I was a trainee. I had studied whatever. And I thought if I keep progressing, someday I'll be a director of Hindustan Lever. And to me, that was a position. You know, you became assistant manager, deputy manager, and you became a director. But by the time I actually came up to being a director, and in this, so my first half of my career was spent from till 1987 trying to become a director. From 1987 onwards, I have trying to be a good director. And so there are two very different patterns, you know.
Very well.
I realized that trying to become a director is very different from trying to be a very good director. Obviously, what is of interest to your audience is the second part and not the first one. This is not about career planning. And I feel that people should think about being a director. And I have written down 5 short principles, which I would just like to mention. And then if you wish, we can explore one or all of them depending on the time available. The first principle I want to say is directorship of a company, and you can read that to mean entrepreneurship, startups, MSMEs, all of that. Directorship of a company is not like pregnancy or maternity, that it just happens because you're the right age or stage.
Right.
But governance of a company is like motherhood and nurturing.
Very nice.
And you don't go to attend a course on motherhood. There is no BSc motherhood. But there are mentors who can help you to be a better mother. It may be a mother, it may be a mother-in-law, it may be your friend who has had a baby a little before you. So just like we learn motherhood and nurturing of a child, partly through instruction and partly through experience, governance is also something that you learn partly through experience and partly through instruction. So that's the first point I want to make. Second point I want to make is an attitude. A founder of a company or the person who's running an MSME or even a large company, I'm mentioning MSMEs because that is the nature of your
primarily you're talking about promoter companies.
Promoter companies must regard themselves not as this is my company, but as people who are laying the first few bricks on the highway, and must remember that on that highway for hundreds of years afterwards, various pilgrims and travelers will travel with hope in their heart and ambition in their eyes. So they are creating it for the community. I always like to say that if I ask you who built the GT road from Peshawar or Lahore to Calcutta, you would say Sher Shah Suri, because all of us have read the same history book. But you know, he didn't touch a single brick. But all those people who toiled to set the bricks made the GT road on which for the last 700, 800 years people have traveled. So that's the way you should think of your attitude to the company. It's not your company. The third principle is that business and entrepreneurship and directorship of a company is merely a conduit. You are merely a conduit for society's advancement. And just like when you have a child at home, you want the child not only to learn academics, but also music, dance, sports. A business person, an entrepreneur must impart to his company the societal ideals. It's not that you'll do this later. If you have a child and you say, after the child is 30 years old, I'll teach music and dance, it's a bit late. Okay. The fourth is that God has given us ears which have 4 times the area of our mouth. but we tend to use them in the other proportion. We use our mouth 4 times and listen to people only once.
Correct.
So I think if you're a leader or a director, you must learn to listen 4 times as much as you speak.
Correct.
And the last point I want to make is you are impermanent. Whether you're a founder or a director or the promoter's family, and the graveyards are full of people who thought that they'll be there forever. But creating succession, creating capability, whether it's in family members or professionals, is a very important part of your task. So I will stop there. I've just given you 5 ideas just to make it a conversation piece. There can be 10 more, but let's talk about these 5 or any other questions that you might have.
No, I have so many questions rising in my mind. All of the principles were very well taken, very well expressed. Coming to the second and the fifth one, where you say that I totally agree with you that you can't, assume that it's yours, the company is yours, and there are no other people who have got any ownership on it, or that selfish attitude, self-centered attitude becomes very prevalent, especially when it's a single person company or a promoter company. So also at the end, when you were talking about the fifth principle, where it is meant for others, you are at some point of time, you have to hand it over to others to you, or like, for example, ESG. Okay. So in both these cases, I want you to also cogitate and think about skin in the game. So when a person has skin in the game, he feels a sense of ownership. And how do you match that dichotomy? So I have skin in the game, therefore I have ownership. Yet at the same time, I must not consider that it's mine. Not be selfish about it. Understand that it is meant to serve others.
I think the best example, without getting pedantic or philosophical about it, I can quote is a mother. A mother can take the view that मेरे खोक से निकला ये बच्चा, ये मेरा बच्चा है, and she can be all possessive about everything that bachcha does till the age of 50. Well, you create a distorted human being if you took that attitude. If you took the attitude कि मेरे खोक से निकला है, मैंने पाल पोस के बड़ा किया, but now that the child is 15 or 18, that child will make his or her own choices, and my job is to be a mentor and be available, but to know that they will lead their own lives based on their own karmas. Then you're probably being a responsible mother. And I think this attitude of skin in the game, does the mother have skin in the game? Till her dying day, she has skin in the game. But is she the only one with skin in the game? Not really. The university which trained your child, the company where he worked, my mother is not alive now, but if she was alive and she said everything that this guy has done is because of me, that would not be factual. So I think by all means have a sense of skin in the game, but not the only person with skin in the game. Remember, there are many other people with skin in the game. The employees, for example, skin in the game doesn't mean ownership. It means it's your emotional sustenance. So I have not owned Hindustan Lever or Tata's for that matter, but I believe I have skin in the game. Okay.
Very well said. Really very well expressed. Coming to the fourth point, that it's meant for society. At some point of time, you have to ensure that the company works for the betterment of society, the community, the environment. And your take on ESG, because CSR is, what has been imposed by the government via the Companies Act. But now considering that after the pandemic also, the world has had to recalibrate itself, with their thoughts on corporate governance vis-a-vis ESG. I would like your views on that.
I always like to take metaphors because otherwise it becomes technical and pedantic, and I'm not very good at that. Just like I took the example of the mother in the last example, I would like to take the example of nature, Kudrat, Prakriti. If there are 7.8 million species that have been created on this planet.
That's true.
Since the inception. But now only about 200,000 exist. I mean, most of them are gone.
Yes.
And if you look at what has survived and grown, it is those species that have given as much as they've taken. Right? So my favorite example, since I love to tell stories, is a possum. A possum is like a squirrel, approximately. And in Australia, the possum, which is a small little animal, comes to the eucalyptus tree. It digs a hole because there are holes around, and it deposits its excreta there, which becomes nourishment for the eucalyptus tree, which gives it shade. I'm taking that as an example. There are many, many, many examples. One man's food is another man's pet, So when it comes to matters like ESG, I think it's not some philosophical question that is to strike an entrepreneur, but am I giving as much as I'm taking?
Correct.
Now, typically, you tend to take more. अरे कल का profit आ जाएगा, परसों देखा जाएगा. But that's once in a while you'll do something like that. That's understandable because we are not perfect human beings. But that is not the way to run a business. And I think the fundamentals of ESG are Vasudeva Kutumbam.
Yes, absolutely.
And I have got passage in this planet for a short time. Let's face it, you'll all go.
Yes.
We are all big, important people, 5 feet, 6 feet tall, weighing 70 kilos. But when it's all over, you fit into a small earthen pot, that much. So we must remember that our body is 95% water and air.
Yes.
It's only 5% material. So we might as well be mindful of the environment. So if you just burn coal, discharge effluent into the river, throw plastic waste, then you must ask yourself, हमारे घर के अंदर आके कोई किया तो ये मेरे लिए चलेगा क्या? I think that is an attitudinal change that is required.
So do you feel that as a corporate governance good practice, that ESG should be brought in more even so than CSR as the days go by? Because I don't find that boards are cogitating on this and including this into their, their thinking and their attitudes.
Even CSR, we've had a great tradition of Indian philanthropy. And to many people, CSR means corporate social responsibility. Social meaning for the village, for the community, you give money for a temple, for a school. We consider those to be CSR. And there are great business people who have contributed, including the Indian independence movement, by the way. Is that CSR? Had it not been for the philanthropy, corporate philanthropy of industrialists, within the means at that time, Gandhiji would not have had money and the Congress party wouldn't have had money in those days. So I see CSR as a much broader subject. Corporate social responsibility includes community, employees, alliance partners, which is vendors and so on, and nature, water, because these are not free. And therefore, while we may be stuck with CSR as though it's a social and rural development and so on, I regard CSR to have three distinct components in it. One is social mobilization, the second is environmental mobilization, and the third is other stakeholder mobilization. Being fair to your suppliers, paying them on time. Is it part of good business practice? You can call it CSR, but it's a corporate social responsibility. You can't have a situation where you're celebrating your 60th birthday in Goa while your employees haven't been paid their salary.
Exactly. So it's a very well expressed point, and I wish a lot of the people who are listening, as we said, our main people are MSMEs, SMEs, promoter directors, and family-run businesses, as well as startup directors. I'm sure they're listening to this and understanding what point you're trying to be. So can I go on to another question, that what is the thought processes behind building a core team, co-founders, key managerial personnel? What do you feel should be the thought process? What were your thought processes behind that?
Well, to be honest, whether you're heading a unit, like a factory or a regional branch, a sales region, or a company, you need a team of people with whom to work. And KMP and all, as a company secretary, company law has defined it, they become your team. You not only share the workload, but share your concerns as well. What the Companies Act has done is and SEBI have defined something called key management personnel, whom they will hold accountable. You see, a regulator is there to regulate, to wag his finger. He must know whom to catch. Even the concept of a promoter is a stupid idea. Nowhere in the world do they have a concept of a promoter. It's only in India. Because the regulator wants to know whom to catch and whose picture to put in the newspaper if they don't pay their bank loans.
Naming and shaming.
Naming and shaming. But frankly, what's a promoter? You can say he's an important shareholder. You can say he's a majority shareholder. You can say he's the sole shareholder. I understand those, but I don't understand what's a promoter. Who's the promoter of Tata? Jamshedji Tata died long ago.
Right.
So was Mr. Kohli the promoter of TCS?
Just recently passed away.
He gave his life to TCS.
Life to it.
According to me, he's a promoter, but not in the SEBI sense, not in the legal, not in the legal sense.
Well said. So you have written about 20 plus books, and you have also shared so much about your journey as an author earlier to us. I would like to ask you, what about a little bit about your journey as an author, how you wanted to express your thoughts, and what is your favorite book and why?
Well, I'm an accidental author. What happened to me when I was in Saudi Arabia, I mean, like everybody else in college, you edited some magazine, that doesn't make you qualified to be an author. But when I was in Saudi Arabia, I had a huge business dilemma. And the dilemma was that prior to my arrival as the chairman of the company, the Unilever, the parent, had spent almost 10 million pounds in those days, which is a lot of money, researching a particular product.
Okay.
Which would be competitive and take market share and so on and so forth.
Right.
Now, when I arrived in Saudi Arabia, I have this habit, probably acquired in Hindustan Lever, that you must go to the market and kick the sand. Otherwise, you don't understand what's really happening. I did that. And I came to the intuitive conclusion that this product that they have researched is the wrong product. An alternative would work better.
Right.
But a lot of people had staked their reputation and their money in making the product. And the question that came to my mind was, why do I feel intuitively? Because they've done a lot of research, market research, this, that, and they could show that this product was preferred over some other product with 5%, 95% confidence level, and so on and so forth. And so I started thinking about human intuition. And that, of course, I took my business decision with the right people and I went ahead. But when I started thinking about what is human intuition, it struck me that life's most important decisions are taken intuitively, not rationally.
Okay.
Whereas we think we are very rational.
Mm-hmm.
For example, whom to marry. If you take a rational decision on that, you're dead. If I carry a little chit giving points for smile, for consideration, etc., then I say this girl got 7.7, that girl got 7.9, I'll be dead. Conversely, if I stay to decide whom to stay married to, if I take a rational decision, you're finished. You take these both intuitively. If I've sat on the selection panel for at least a couple of hundred CEOs.
Okay.
And of course, the HR department gives you their CV and their past record and so on. But do I take it rationally or intuitively? At the end of all the rationality, you'll pose them certain types of questions and then you say, I prefer this candidate to that candidate, right? It's intuitive. So life's most acquisition. Should I acquire a company? Should I sell my company? Because I'm a startup or a family business. I have spent so far 10 crores on it, but somebody is offering me 50 crores. Shall I sell it? You take that decision.
At what point of time is a good time to sell?
And at what price? All those decisions. They are all taken intuitively. So I said to myself, human beings pride themselves on being rational, but they take their most important decisions in life intuitively. And that caused me to write my first book called The Case of the Bonsai Manager in 2007, for which Ratan Tata was kind enough to write the foreword. and Penguin published it. So that got me into a journey which had the following pattern. When I faced a business dilemma, I of course took the business decision based on whatever I had to, but I started researching the subject. So the second subject I researched was self-awareness. Why are people not self-aware of who they are and how does it affect their work? And I wrote my second book called When the Penny Drops.
Absolutely.
Then I found another dilemma that by this time I'm getting on to 50 and my age group would say, आजकल के बच्चे ऐसे हैं, you know, हम लोग ऐसे थे.
Okay.
Which is the biggest load of rubbish, because when you were a bacha, your father said the same thing, and when your
Same
father
thing.
was that age,
Same
your grandfather
thing.
said the same.
Correct.
So I wrote a third book to help bridge this gap called What the CEO Really Wants from You and what you want from the CEO and how to bridge that gap. And so on and so forth. Each book came out of a particular, I would say, pain or question, unanswered question.
Something like a delivery.
Sorry?
Something like a delivery of a child.
Yeah, I mean, it was bothering me. It was going around, and of course, I would just want to forget about it. So that's how each of my books came. And the journey hasn't ended because the number of questions are limitless. And so long as,
which is your favorite book, sir?
you know, it's like asking a mother who's your favorite child. It's tough to say. Very tough. But I think all my books are quite nice.
Yes, I'm sure. And lovely titles like When the Penny Drops. Very nice. So you have also been, on a number of boards of promoter-driven companies. How do you feel that they can, transition towards professionally governed companies? What are the best corporate governance practices which they can adopt, including MSMEs and SMEs? What within their sphere and what is the scale of their operations? Within that, how best they can align themselves to better corporate governance practices?
You know, the first thing they have to answer honestly and truly within their heart is, do I really want to professionalize? Many of them don't want to professionalize. They want an interim person till their son becomes the right age or comes back from water or wherever. It's like saying, now that my son is or my daughter is 20, let him or her make their own choices. Parents don't say that. Even when the daughter is 20, they would like to influence whom she marries, what they do, etc., etc. If she's following in line, it's okay. But if you're in Yogi Adityanath's state, you may even be breaking some law. Some dumb stuff goes on in our public domain of this nature. So I think the first question that promoters and family people have to answer is, do I really want to professionalize? And if the answer is yes, because if the answer is no, then there's nothing further to discuss. You just get your sons and your brothers to come into the business. The second question to ask is, if I don't want to professionalize, how will I train my son or my brother to run it professionally? I'll give you an example. Back in 1926, the founder of Unilever, called William Hesketh Lever, was going to die. And his son, who was by this time grown up, very well educated, very urbane, he said, I'm interested in literature, science, and public affairs. So the father said, and son must have had a conversation, I'm assuming. And they got a professional CEO in 1930, 1926, I think, saying, and the son said, I'm a shareholder, I'll get my money. I'll get my dividend. And the founder died, leaving it in what he called the Lord Leverhulme Foundation. And the family got something, there was some formula. And Lord Leverhulme Foundation has done wonderful work in the area of upgrading museums and scientific establishments. And since 1926, we've had professional CEOs running Unilever, right? So if you want your family member, then you must decide how he should be trained. If you think it's going to be really professional, then you must decide it's not your private company that you can, even if it's legally speaking a private company. how will you let go? So it's like a mother who's saying, my daughter is grown up now. Will I send her to college? Oh, well, she must get a degree, but she must come home and cook. It doesn't work that way, She has to let her daughter, and if the daughter wants to fly and say, I want to now go to the US, if she wants to marry, that's also fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But I'm just saying she must make her decisions. Now, if you're willing to let a professional make the decision, then you just keep the oversight role, then it's fine.
So, sir, just taking this question ahead, when it comes to startups, I mean, when you said professionally managed companies, the startups usually can't afford CEOs. So, at that angle, how do they, try to bring in professionalism in their companies?
No, first of all, your question that startups can't afford CEOs is not true. Okay. Because many of them
have, yeah. But usually most of the startups treat themselves as entrepreneurs. So that's why they don't have that inclination. Yeah.
So there are startups and startups. But many of them give them share options and bring them in, and some of them become very rich that way.
Correct.
Right? I think the act of getting a professional CEO is an act of faith, training, and attitude. And that will vary. And I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. I mean, if somebody came and said, I want my daughter to be very good in home maintenance, and the daughter is very keen to be, and she loves cooking, there's nothing wrong with it. I won't look down on it. But you should not deny her an education or an exposure to the world. And each person chooses.
Wonderful.
But it is a leap of faith, no? Because
it is a leap of faith. It is definitely a leap of faith. So let's see. In some cases, I'm taking real examples which can be quoted without offense to anybody. Jamshedji Tata, the founder of Tata's, when he died, he had two sons to whom he left the business. One son died. The other son had no issue. So they had to look for CEOs from outside. Outside meaning outside the immediate matrilineal line. And they did find cousins and this and that. And now they have a Tamil Brahmin sitting and heading it. Not even a Parsi, certainly not a family member. So professionalization has happened in phases and stages. The fact that there is a family member doesn't make it a bad thing. I don't want you to get the impression that if you groomed your son, but if you groomed your son and he is not sufficiently prepared for the job, then it's bad. Because ultimately everybody is working for the institution. You look at certain political parties now where you insist on the matrilineal line passing, and then you see the state they get into. And that's not good. Because at the end of the day, your goddess is the institution, not your daughter or son or your cousin or whoever.
Wonderful. Sir, in fact, you have worked with MNCs, you have worked with Indian companies, Indian businesses. So what has been your experience or major difference between, working with MNCs and working with the Indian businesses? A major one difference?
In the case of the MNCs, almost everybody is professional. Almost, I can say, literally everybody is professional. Then you have the human foibles that come into play, like any human situation. There can be greed, there can be envy, there can be, ego, all those things. But this is not a subject that we are discussing now. In a family managed business, like Hemas, which is a company in Sri Lanka, which is owned, I think, 60% or thereabouts by the family, 4 brothers. In order to make themselves professional, they did an IPO some time back. So they feel answerable to somebody else. Of course, they had to become IPO worthy, otherwise it did not happen. The second thing they did is they packed in voluntarily independent directors.
Okay, good.
And the third thing that they did is to pack in really seasoned independent directors. So I shouldn't say they encourage dissent, but they encourage multiple points of view.
Very true.
Ultimately, collectively, you'll take a decision. but people with different perspectives on it. And they spend a lot of time selecting. Now, I will retire and step down from that board shortly in the next few months. The amount of time they spend thinking about who they want to replace me with and how to select that candidate and what skills he should bring to the table, he or she should bring to the table. These are very important attributes. And they are very particular about diversity, though it's not legally required. They said it doesn't look nice. We have no lady director at all. And that doesn't mean you catch hold of the first person who's walking around, but you say, what kind of a lady director do I want? What do I want that person to contribute? It's not that ladies are all dumb. It's a question of looking for them. So it's a very responsible family managed business. I always comment that that's a model. Godrej is another example. It's a family-owned company, but it's professionally managed.
Correct.
Even Tata says, I suppose you could argue, it's not quite family-owned, but owned by a trust.
So what do you feel will be the skill sets or the attributes which should be actively looked at when we are trying to groom, MentorMyBoard is trying to groom or coach? What are the 5 or 6 tips which you would like to give us so that we can concentrate on those particular attributes, not necessarily only skill sets as in, corporate governance or financial literacy or cyber acumen, but these other attributes which are actually way more important.
A board is competent and successful because of collective capability, not individual competence.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to tell you things like they must be understanding accountancy and law and stuff like that. There is a minimum level, a threshold level of exposure they must have had. And you don't need me to tell you that anybody who's trying to be a director of a company must be able to read a financial statement, may not be an expert on it, may still require help with the intricacies of accounting, but should be able to be comfortable with the financial statement. Or if somebody comes and says under section 305, he shouldn't immediately collapse saying, okay, leave it to the lawyers, It must be meshing. If somebody speaks a lot because he's got an expertise in marketing,
Right.
then to balance it, there must be somebody who's got somebody with production knowledge, right? So you must have meshing capabilities. If somebody has a very deep view of that industry, say fast-moving consumer goods, you must also have one person who sits back and looks at the world and what's happening in the world. I always say that a good board of directors should have both geologists as well as astronomers. A geologist, if you show him the earth, he'll pick up his axe and start digging. He'll say at 10 feet, 100 feet, I hit water. At 1,000 feet, I hit iron ore. At 10,000 feet, I hit lead. Okay. He wants to know what is inside this. That's a geologist's attitude. If you show an astronomer the earth, he will sit there and stare into the skies. He say, what's there? What are those things twinkling there? What is this earth a part of? They have very different perspectives. Both are looking at the earth. So when you see spaceships, people who went out to space and they give you a picture of how the earth looks in the middle of the firmament, you say, wow, earth is part of a much larger galaxy. It deepens your respect for things like ESG, for example. Whereas if you're sitting here all the time, digging a new well, digging a foundation for a new house, you have a different attitude. So I call them geologists and astronomers. And we are not fully geologists or fully astronomers, but a bit of both. But you must have a good mix of them. And remember one thing, when you are doing, your question was about when we are mentoring them. Mentor people to their strengths, not to remove their weaknesses.
Yes.
Because all of us are imperfect.
Yes.
All of us have weaknesses. And it's like coaching a tennis player. At a certain stage of the game of training, you don't try to improve the backhand further.
Correct.
You try to run around and hit the forehand, even on the backside, on the backhand side, So it's exactly the same with people. If some people are very reticent to talk,
Correct.
don't try to make him into talkative. character.
Yes, absolutely.
But let him be very thoughtful and reflective about the odd comment that he does make. So try to build on strengths.
Correct. Build on strengths. That's very well put. Another question which I wanted to ask you: we have got a number of directors who are very well positioned to accept positions on boards, to be inducted or invited onto boards. What would you be saying would be the best way they can position themselves? Because of course on LinkedIn and all these places they are very active, and also Mentor My Board is trying its best through networking. But what would you give as your take on how best they can be invited on boards?
Now, I don't know when you say how best can they be invited. If they have something to offer, if they can give as much as they can take, then it's a good match. If they are there because it's nice to say I'm a director of a company, you may be getting some fees or something like that. Doesn't make sense. So, lena kya hai, dena kya hai? And iska ek balance sheet karo. Do what a good Gujarati Vaniya would do. Debit side ma soch hai, credit side ma soch hai, does it balance?
Sir, I would, just add what you said, as a director or as an aspiring director, person should do a self-realization as to what all you can contribute and what are your values and how you can, stand apart, and so that you are visible to the boards to attract you. So
and don't be like a preening, or budding actress, who needs to attract everybody's attention by showing I'm so pretty or I'm so well dressed or whatever. Some directors have this great desire to show that हम भी काम के हैं. आपका काम दिखना चाहिए rather than आपको दिखाना चाहिए.
Correct. The results speak for themselves. Well put. So then I just wanted to ask you also, like when you're dealing with employees, vendors, other people, what would be your thoughts on how you can, or MMB or the company's directors can best groom them to do the best for their other stakeholders?
Well, frankly, there are so many stakeholders. Why should I assume that they don't want to do their best? That it requires some director to tell them. Well, how can they groom the director to do his best?
Correct.
I think this driving kind of leadership, that I have to make sure that employees do their work. I have to make sure that my vendors are doing the best. But what will you prove? How will you prove to them that you're doing your best? So I think the tone of the top makes a big difference in a company. And if you set the example, just like in a family, if you say, "Bacche jhoot nahi bolte hain," but the papa jhoot tells his wife, "Bolo ghar mein nahi hai," the child is noticing it. So the tone at the top has to be set by the director, and he must let people find their own level. Okay, got it?
Thank you. Thank you so much for, I know you have to rush for another
commitments. Yeah.
But thank you for all your valuable inputs, and we really look forward for a directors roundtable with you in the month of January. So we'll be getting in touch with you for that. And I'm sure whatever insights you have given, they were so practical, and they were so, you can correlate them with your real life, and that's really going to help the viewers, the directors, promoters, and even aspiring directors to be more connected with. So wonderful.
Thank you very much. I value the opportunity. I'm spending a lot of my time now emptying my mind of whatever experiences I've had, and you're offering me a forum to do so. I want to die empty. All my experiences I should have shared with those who want me to share it. And when I go, khopdi khali hona chahiye.
Okay. I totally agree.
Your immense knowledge has to reach to millions of people. So
Take care.
We
all
will
the best.
try to do that. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.